Just because the 12C is 30 years old, it's also because I didn't have time to read up on tensor calculus and talk more about Einstein.
That's right, yeah.
This is an easier talk to give than tensor calculus, I assure you.
With Einstein counted.
So the idea was just to say how the 12C has changed. It hasn't changed much really, as I'll show you in a few minutes, but it has changed a little bit over the, well, decades, 33 decades, but why be simplistic? Let's call it over the millennia. I mean, we're a new millennium. So what has changed, what hasn't changed, and how do I get to go to the next slide? That's the 1981 at the top, and the 2011, the most recent one. Unless you've got good eyesight, you can scarcely see it, because this is out of focus, of course. The only difference really is the 30th anniversary, and the gold is very slightly different. I think some people complain that the gold isn't as gold as it used to be. On the very original one...
Can you switch to full screen from behind? It's very hard to read.
Yes, sorry.
Go up the slide, click up on slideshow on the top.
F5.
F5, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
F5. Just hit F5.
Okay, so what has changed? I don't think I'll need a microscope for that, because you can see here anyway. The very original ones had a battery compartment with 2 bits of plastic. If you pulled the plastic back, they had these odd little tin foil things that bent back, rather like on the Series 30 models. If you angle it, you can see it's like that. And those simply broke off very quickly. So very early 12Cs, that's broken off on them. So pretty quickly HP went to this version with a single spring and 1 tab. And only 1 piece of plastic. I've never figured out why there's plastic there at all. I can only think that it's there so that you can put the first battery in and it doesn't fall out while you're fiddling about to put the second one in. Okay, the more recent ones, well, we've seen a single CR2032 and now we've got 2 CR2032s. It was interesting what Dennis said, that they went from 2 batteries to 3. Well, the design's done the same again. They've decided that 1 CR2032 isn't really enough. They've gone to 2. And the batteries on my pointer have gone. Has anyone got a pointer I can borrow? Is this one?
Yes.
There's a green one.
Try as an airline pilot.
Competition.
Defensive.
Thank you. That's a lot better. The other thing that changed, okay, quite early on, it's not visible here, what Dennis was talking about was reading the battery. They wanted a very clear signal that the battery was dead, but the first one they tried didn't work at all. So if you look at the manual for an early 12C, it says change the batteries when the display dims, which is a pretty obvious way to do it. But then the engineers actually thought of something better, and if you have any except the very earliest ones, just there in the display, there's a little star. And once the batteries die on yours, if they ever have, after all you've only been using it for 30 years, it starts blinking. And all the newer manuals and all the 12s except the very early ones, there's a little star there that blinks, and you know you've got to change the batteries within the next year. So those were the 2 changes that came early. They were very nice machines. The software really didn't change at all inside. So let's see what happened next. The early keyboards, if you look at them at an angle, they're very shiny, and the letters stand up a little bit. They stand proud. After a time, the machines on which they were banging them away began to wear. And if you look at a slightly newer HP, look at the eye there, look at it at an angle, and I think you can all see E to the X there better than I. What was happening, and we discussed this last year, the moulding worked by, first of all, taking the black plastic, then injecting into the gap that was left white plastic, and then banging this hard against the flat surface so that this was completely level. But they used the same flat surface for all 4 models. So if they'd been making an 11C for a week, banging that particular key against the flat surface, that flat surface was no longer flat. It very slightly had a worn out space in it, shaped like that key. And then they started making the 12C for a week, using that same flat plate. And you got an I there. And then the next 2 weeks they were making a 16C on the same flat plate. And you would see ETX, I, and then the actual letter B on that key. And so it's fun to take old calculators, look at them and naggle, and to see that they've got 3 different labels on there. This is the sort of games that you can play with it. I mean, if you look at it straight on, and it still looks like a key, this is the new version. It's now just painted on the surface, and it's not shiny, it's matte, but you don't have this fun either. It's just a painted key, and the paint will wear off sooner or later. Whereas this will never wear off. Well, on this, if you use it long enough, that elevated surface will wear off. This will just keep going forever. Okay, what else changed? Well, they were made in the USA, they were made in Singapore, then they were made in Brazil, then they were made in Malaysia. The older ones say Malaysia here and say 249 whatever M. The newer ones just say Malaysia. And now, of course, they're made in China and you can't even read it. Especially if you take the photograph badly, as I did. Dates in the examples. The dates have been 1980 all the way until recently, when they changed the 2000s. There was one particular early model on which they got the dates wrong. And this is where I start using the microscope instead. So how does that work?
Alt-tab.
Here's the test.
Alt-tab, until you get to the one.
Which one?
One more. There you go.
That's it. Thank you. Hand-eye coordination, Richard said. Interesting features on this one. From this side, the original one was an algebraic calculator, but apparently the Chinese were never told that algebraic calculators usually have brackets on them. So this was an algebraic calculator without brackets. So algebraic mode on it wasn't very useful. But as far as I understand, Cyril, you told the Chinese build an algebraic version, and so they did it the cheapest way possible. Is that what happened?
We basically, we asked them to do an algebraic 12C. We gave them the mathematical library that came from the 10B2, which is the Napier version, non-30-bit, a crap version basically. And they started working with some of the old people from the ACO, and they produced that. And we put it out, and the week after we say, hey, wait a second, it's missing parentheses on the thing. And it's like, uh-oh. In addition, it had some issue. The algorithm for things such as IRR were not converging properly and were really bad. Dennis Harm is gone, so he wouldn't be commenting on that right now. So that's, we had to go and come back through it. No, sorry, let me rephrase that. That's not what happened. We asked the Chinese to build that device as an algebraic, and they did it. They created that thing, and it had all the primary algorithm and with the parentheses missing. And we said, okay, we need to fix that. And that's when we said, okay, you're going to take our math library that we developed during the ACO time. That was post-ACO, because that was 2003 or 2004, something like that. And we told them to work with, not Hydrix, but Madison, who was a company created by a couple of ex-HP guys, including the one who did the 10B2 during the ACO times. And the next version of the Platinum that came out, which did not have the problem with the IR algorithm, which did have results that did match the 12C in the calculation, because it was using the 10B2, the library developed for 10B2, that was that one.
Nice, and it also had these features.
Yes, and we added the undo, the backspace, the parentheses, But there's a square, I think. So
Is
per function.
there an actual extra function on this one?
Yeah, there's on times there's a square function on multiplication.
Yes.
You already had it in the first one.
Sorry.
Okay, but turn this over. You see something else interesting. This was the first model where the dates stopped being 1994, in the 1980s, 1990s. Except in one place. Here, 2004, but they actually left the 1999 after it.
Oh.
So if you put in the whole of that example, you got rather odd results. All of the 2004 followed by that. And that was the other mistake on that one, and that too was fixed as soon as this model came out. And these are the dates that are now used on all the examples right up till now.
And another thing we did at the same time, we also changed the example in the user manual to have more up-to-date date, but also we changed all the example, we changed the interest rate. Because all the manual was developed with 1980s interest rate in the 10% ranges, and we dropped everything to things more realistic with the time.
Now, the original 12C Platinum, the gold has turned to platinum there, though I don't know how you can tell that that's platinum or just plain aluminum. Yeah. Okay. Now the whole of the keyboard was also changed to that, and lots of people didn't like that. What happened? Well, people didn't like the color scheme for two reasons. The Brazilians wanted it gold, so the Brazilians got their own special version, the Prestige, where that is still pale gold, and this is sort of very pale gold too. But there's the real reason for that was to make sure that people, because Brazil is the first place where people started realizing the IRR issue and the problem, and we also had to change the first scheme to make it very, very, very clear that this was an updated version that did not have the bugs of the previous version. So you satisfied their want for gold, and you satisfied their wish to be very clear that this didn't have the bugs in it anymore.
It was more the bugs issue. The gold wasn't the biggest, was a way to achieve a mean, not for color reason.
Okay. Thanks. However, people still didn't like the color.
Why in the first place have you ever created the Platinum?
Because we were afraid that we would lose market share due to the fact that 12C was only RPM. So that's why we really wanted to have.
You wanted to have something algebraic.
Yeah, and we wanted to have to be more available, more accessible for people, and we also wanted to try to cost reduce at the same time. Because up to that point, when we did the change from the the 3 batteries to the ones here 2032, the main reason that was happening is because we could not produce at 9.5 micron chip anymore, because the manufacturer of the phone we were telling us, we have a room where we've got like old people, and that's what the machine to produce these things are. But we need a room now for modern technology such as 0.25 micron. So you find a solution, and we actually had to basically take the old chips, cut them off, scan them to try to get back the schematics from that, recreate the schematics to be able to redo them in, and I think it was 0.5 micron times technology we ended up using to create the new version of the CPU. But basically the CPU, the original CPU was fully reverse engineered from the actual die to be recreated to use the new versions.
Now it's an interesting thing that areas where the 12C was popular, they only buy the 12C. In places where the 12C wasn't, they only buy the 12C Platinum. So you've got two essentially identical products, slight differences, but they're completely mutually exclusive in terms of sales.
Okay, when the 25th anniversary version of the Platinum came out, they went back to the black keyboard background. Was that necessary?
Yeah.
That's, purely a marketing decision at that point.
So I was there for that, so what happened was the 25th anniversary edition really did take off, it exceeded our expectation. So we decided, but there is something to this, there is some cachet involved with getting a 12C that looks like the original 12C, but kind of cheating with the algebraic mode.
Okay, so what happened was when they stopped making the 25th anniversary version, they carried on making it with the black background. So this is the current version of the 12C Platinum. And Richard is waving his hands at me, and the light has gone orange. So let me just show the latest one, which you've already seen. There were a couple of other points in my printed paper. The key click has changed just ever so slightly, but I'm not going to be able to show that even with a microscope, so I won't bother with that one. The logo on the front is always the same. There's no official HP change in logo except for the 25th and the 30th anniversaries. However, lots of companies made their own logos. This is University of Michigan. Students on the accounting course got one of these, but it had actually had the extra logos put on them. And there are lots of big companies which simply put their own logo on the front. They buy several thousand a year and put their logo on, and it's been stolen from them if it's come away. However, a lot of these have shown up on eBay, so I don't think they were stolen, simply due to the fact that there were a lot on eBay, not just one or two. The batteries, well, I don't really have time to go through the batteries, or do I?
No.
Thank you, Richard. Well, if it stops me, then I'll stop. Where made? Dates and examples I've done. There you are. I haven't even bothered with the batteries there. I knew I was going to be running out of time. There were errors in dates. There's the Prestige, has the gold changed. The internals, Cyril's told us about that, thank you. Clones, who makes clones? Aurora makes a clone, Victor make a clone, but guess who else makes a clone? HP make them clones. After all, the 12C Prestige is simply a clone, and the Platinum are simply clones of the original, aren't they? What sort of other clones does HP make? Look at that. We all know about the iPhone apps, but this is so successful a product that even HP themselves have been cloning it. What more can one say? 12C is so successful that even HP themselves clone it. Long may it live. And if anyone wants to look at more of these examples later on, I'd be happy to put them out on the table somewhere. Thanks.